Today I'm going to start with a parable about fire. That's why I'm wearing this, and I got my fire shirt. So I want to start with something that happened that is very much of a parable about today. In 1910, just 5 years after President Theodore Roosevelt started the United States Forest Service, a devastating series of forest fires swept through 3 million acres of prime timber in the states of Washington, Montana, and Idaho. It is referred to as the day when the mountain roared. Following that 3 million acre destruction of virgin forest, the government built a large number of lookout towers, built better trails, and created a communication network. They were built to stop this destruction from ever happening again. They built over 5,000 fire lookout towers that were manned with what they called smoke spotters, who would communicate to smoke chasers who were stationed on the ground. These smoke chasers would investigate smoke that was reported to them by the smoke spotters up on the towers. And they were to determine whether it was a legal fire or a destructive fire. If it was uncontrolled or illegal, they would try and put it out or call for backup help. An institute teacher I knew some 40 years ago was a smoke spotter for a few summers right after he was married. He and his new wife lived during the summer fire season in a single-room apartment with windows for walls on top of a high tower on the highest peak, giving them an unblocked 360-degree view of the forest. All they had in their glass-walled apartment was a few personal items, some food, binoculars, maps, beds, cooking equipment, and 2 glass-legged stools. Their assignment was to spot any situation that could turn into a fire. He told us many stories, but for me the most exciting thing he told us was when a thunderstorm was coming. He said 44% of forest fires are started by lightning strikes. So high on their tower apartment, they could see miles away in every direction. And when thunderclouds were on the horizon and heading their way, they would radio the smoke chasers on the ground to be ready. These people on the ground in the forest had no idea a problem was coming, because the trees, they could only see what was right there over their heads. It looked clear and sunny. They had no hint of the coming storm or the danger until they were warned by the people on the tower who could see far off the things they could not see. As the storm rolled near, he told us the spotters on the tower would unplug all electrical equipment, clear the counters, take the 2 glass-leg stools and place them in the middle of the room, sit on it, hook their feet up on the rungs, and wait to be hit by lightning. They also needed to watch and record all lightning strikes on the area map. He told us that lightning fire can start hours or even days after a strike. So they needed to know where the strikes were, so if smoke came up, they knew it was a lightning fire. The lightning can travel into the roots of the trees or below the visible ground into the dead matted grass and weeds, and smolder there for hours, even days, and then suddenly burst into flames. Their high-rise glass apartment was basically a lightning rod. And although they were safe on those glass-leg stools, the noise and the static electricity jumping and popping all over the metal frames and all over everywhere in the apartment was, he said, electrifying. And the sound, he said any band would love to be able to duplicate the noise of those lightning booms when the lightning hit his building. In his watchtower, he could warn of coming storms. He could contract those who could help defend against it. He could direct the fire chasers where to go so they could put out the fire before it got too big. He could call in big teams if he needed. I think that idea is what the Lord had in mind when he said to Ezekiel, "O Son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore thou shalt hear the word of my mouth and warn them from me." The Lord also said to Isaiah, "I have set watchmen upon thy walls, O Jerusalem, which shall never hold their peace, day or night." Elder Boyd K. Packer was an apostle for 45 years. His biography is entitled Boyd K. Packer, a Watchman on the Tower. Have you ever seen John 17:3 written on a sign at the football games or in other sports? You know what it says? "This is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent." Realizing the importance to know God and Jesus Christ, I had an interesting experience one General Conference weekend after we had moved from Thatcher to Mesa, Arizona. This one came during the Saturday session of General Conference. I was watching it on TV and the doorbell rang. There were two well-dressed men on my porch. They held up a small pamphlet that their church publishes as they introduced themselves. The cover of the pamphlet caught my eye. It said in big print, "What is God really like?" I looked at the pamphlet, and I looked at them, and I said, "That's a very good question. What's the answer?" They said, "Well, the answer is here," holding up the pamphlet. I responded, remember I was an institute teacher at Mesa Institute at the time. I responded, "Boy, that would be hard. Because doesn't one scripture say God is a spirit? And another scripture says we are all made in the image of God? Doesn't one say God is love, and another scripture says, I, the Lord, am a jealous God? One says Moses saw the finger of God, and another says no man has seen God at any time. How did they determine just what God is like with all these conflicting scriptures? They responded, a group of biblical scholars and scriptorians went through the scriptures over and over again, discussing it at length. Finally, they'd agreed on what God is really like. Then, I must admit, calling on my drama past, I said, "Boy, wouldn't it be nice if we just had a prophet who could just tell us what God is really like instead of trying to figure it all out?" They looked at me for a second, and then one of them said, "Are you a Mormon?" Yes, I proclaimed I am. And I wanted to add, and I know what God is really like. But I didn't. It's interesting that they knew that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have prophets, watchmen on the tower that sees what we cannot see. I want to go back to the scripture we see at the ball games. And this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. If it is so important to know God and Christ, do you think God would create a mass of conflicting scriptures that would take a group of scholars years to decide, and then even after that, they were only guessing? I submit he would not. He is a loving God, and he wants us to know him. He has prophets who know him, and has given us clear and plain scriptures to let us know him too. In the year 2000, the church published a proclamation entitled "The Living Christ, the Testimonies of the Apostles." Our living apostles boldly proclaim to the world, we solemnly testify that his life, which is center to all human history, neither began in Bethlehem or concluded on Calvary. He was the firstborn of the Father, the only begotten Son in the flesh, and the Redeemer of the world. I add my testimony to that truth. Soon General Conference will be here, and we again will hear the living apostles and prophets bear testimony of God and Jesus Christ. They know him, and I testify that we can know him too.